Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. My name's Dawn. I'm the Chief Executive Reducing the Risk, and delighted to be asked to talk about the work we've been doing. It's been about 20 years in the making, really, from when I was at the Thames Valley Police as a domestic violence coordinator. And so this is what I'm going to cover. I love a theory. I am not a researcher. I'm a practitioner by background, but I do love understanding and how things work. I do love understanding research. I do a lot of evaluations of our services, and I'm a big theorist. And so you'll see a lot of theoretical frameworks today that we've used and I've used in a number of services that we've developed. So this is kind of what I'm going to cover. So I'm going to start off with just talking about I'm sure many of you have heard of Simon Sinek, and I'm a huge fan. I've heard him speak on a number of occasions when he's been in the UK. And this is his golden circle. And this really struck with me when I was trying to develop and scale up a service in the previous role. And what we spent a lot of time trying to understand was our why. So why are we trying to do this? How are we going to do and what we're going to do? And so I will be talking about that, what we've done in relation to the work in reducing the risk. And so Simon Sinek's Start with Why is, I think, a must read for anybody who is trying to understand how to change practice. And his book, The Infinite Game, is a must for anybody who leads people, really. I think it's a real must. As Mike said, we are a domestic abuse charity that works in Oxfordshire, but also across Thames Valley. We are relationship based, and what we mean by that is it's not just we think about the relationship, we are in the relationship, and we develop long-term relationships with our clients, with our stakeholders, with anybody that we work with. And so the aim is that we build this long-term trust. And so our practitioners, our champions, our friends, all the people that I will talking about, this is about building that level of trust, and so that they can come to us should they have a need to. We're obviously trauma informed and survivor centered, and we are grounded in theories. As I say, I'm a big theorist, and you'll see that as we go through the presentation. I read a lot of research to understand the problems that we're trying to solve, and I use a lot of evaluation to see if what we've developed answers the questions to the problem we're trying to do. As always, when we talk about domestic abuse, it's so prevalent that we need to be mindful of there may be some things within the content of today's presentation that might be emotionally difficult or triggering. And so just please always look after yourself if there's anything that comes up. Just going to cover our why and our how. And so we try to bottle this into the smallest amount of words to make it the most understandable. And so our why is we want to save lives and we want to improve lives. Now, we can add a lot of descriptive around that, but fundamentally, that is what we're here to do. And our how, we do it through empowering professionals and mobilising communities. That's kind of our aim. And so in relation to the saving lives, we have got a high-risk service, and so that's very much targeted at those individuals who are at the most risk. And the improved lives, this is about support over the longer term. And so we're unusual, I think, in the domestic abuse world, where we don't have a time limit for working with our clients. Even when their risk has been mitigated and reduced, we still stay with them because we don't just want to make them safer, we want to improve their long-term outcomes as well. And our IDVAs love this because I've got a description of how each of us play a role, and we've got a nice some very nice acronyms, I think, anyway. And so we say every IDVA wears big capes. They wear capes. Not every heroes wear capes, but IDVAs do. And so what the IDVA does in this role, they coordinate, they advocate, they protect, they educate, and they support with the aim to empower that individual to reduce their harm. And so that's what we do to improve lives. We empower professionals, and I'll be going into that in more detail, but our champions, which are our professionals that we engage with, they lift their organisation's response to domestic abuse. So they lead, they inspire, they facilitate, and they support, and they teach others about domestic abuse. So we want to build their capacity to feel confident and to know what the remits of what they can and are able to do. And then mobilise communities, and I'll be going in to this a lot more, but this fundamentally started with our Domestic Abuse Friends Network. And our friends, what we ask of them is we want them to be able to listen without judgment, to link, to support, and to lend a hand to raise awareness in the community. And so we've tightened up everything to make it very clear what everybody's role is. Obviously, there's mergers. This is not, you can't be a friend without being a champion. You can be everything. But this was a way of us kind of rationalising what we're doing in a very clear statement. So how do we do this, and what do we do? So like all domestic abuse charities, we work in the prevention space. We're working in 28 schools at the moment, over a 3-year project to make the school a competent, safe place to be able to support individuals who may work there or who may come into the school where domestic abuse is an issue, and also to be competent in supporting children and young people and understand their needs, and also to look at their curriculum. We do obviously protection and safety, and we do support and recovery. A recovery pathway goes from one-to-one stabilisation counselling for any individual which needs immediate counselling. We are very fortunate to have that. But also we have peer support groups, and we've got therapeutic support groups, because not every individual is ready to start a therapeutic support group. And we've got our lived experience group, and we call them, they named themselves the To Be Continued group, because they feel they're still on a journey and they want to stay in contact with us, very light touch contact. And so, for example, last week we had a wreath making event where they came in. We had a Christmas lunch together and they did some wreath making. And these are ex-clients who, if they still need a bit of top up, they want connectivity because of the isolation they've experienced, that's what they do. This is our wedge. So this is all of the services which allow us to show what we're doing and how we're doing it. And this is based on a public health approach. And so our primary prevention on the left-hand side, as you can see, there are our touch bearer schools. And so that's trying to get in before domestic abuse starts. The first block is our prevention, secondary prevention, where domestic abuse has happened. And this is about working in the community and trying to get out to the largest number of people as possible. And this is where our friends sit. We also have friends in businesses, they're called business friends. And as you can see, each of those individuals or each of those groups can refer out to local helpline and outreach, if they need to the military service we've got, or the court service we've got, and also into the recovery service. And we have a partnership with Shout, which is a mental health text line, which is specific for the needs of individuals who've been suffering or impacted by domestic abuse. The middle tranche there is our Champions Network. In Oxfordshire, these are just the Oxfordshire numbers. We've got about 1,800. In fact, we trained another 35 last week. So we've got over 1,800 champions in Oxfordshire. We've got 7,000 across the country, and 4,500 of those have had the full training. So you're still part of the network, but you get an enhanced level of support if you are a trained champion. And these are the individuals that work in organisations, partner organisations, to lift their response to domestic abuse. And we offer that support via the network. And then we've got the sharp end, which is our high risk service, which is about keeping people safe and recovering. So this is what we're trying to test in 3 areas. This is the overall approach. We've individually tested each of the elements, or are testing each of the elements, and we have got Ali, I think, is on the call today, who's helping us to look at how we can embed this into the system in 3 separate distinct locations. And so the aim is to try and say we can have all of these separate, and a lot of domestic abuse charities will be doing all of this, but we're trying to look at it from a systems perspective, and is there a proof of concept? So I'm going to go back to where it all started, just to give you an idea of the theories that we started to use. We didn't know we were using the theories initially, we just kind of bumped into them. As Mike says, 20 plus years ago, after I left nursing and midwifery, I became a domestic abuse coordinator in Thames Valley Police. And for those of you who were around in the late 1990s and early 2000s, domestic abuse was too hard. It was in the too hard category, if you like. And there was some money had come out from central government to do some research around specific approaches. But where we were seen to be in a relatively affluent area, but it was very rural. And so there was one outreach worker for the whole of the county, so hardly anybody in our area ever got any outreach support. And myself and a colleague, Di, were the only two who were victim focused in that area, and we worked for the police. This is before they set up the domestic abuse investigation units. So we were the people who were doing the training, we were the people who were doing the support for the victims, we were the people who were engaging strategically. So we were very fortunate to have a lot of input and access to a lot of things we wouldn't think we would normally get kind of access to. And so what we learned over the first 3 years, by pure accident, there was no thought of us thinking, oh, this is a research project, or we're going to develop something. It was just the fact that we were so immersed in our work and seeing the lives of the victim survivors who were being impacted, and working with the professionals as well, and seeing their lives and how domestic abuse impacted them and what their anxieties were, that we recognised that the professionals lacked knowledge in a lot of cases. We didn't have the language of coercive control, of love bombing, of gaslighting, but actually we talked about those things. And they certainly didn't have the confidence, and sometimes inappropriately held and supported victims because they didn't know what else to do, and they were not connected. They didn't feel a sense of connection. And so we would go out and do the training, and then people would say, you got your card, can I ring you? And so we started to become this informal sounding board for health visitors, for housing, for connection support, for a lot of organisations who were dealing with domestic abuse. And what we were hearing from the victim survivors was they lacked trust in professionals, that they didn't believe professionals understood what the victim was experiencing, and they would assume that whenever a victim spoke, they wanted to leave. And so they always, this was the feedback we got, on many occasions they started speaking in the wrong place. So we were very mindful of communicating where that individual is and how to do that. And the system, the area we were living was 600 square miles. It was rural. There was kind of no infrastructure, and the police were the only people really who had a dedicated people on the ground who were helping victims. And so that was the background to where we are today. This is 25 years ago. It's a long journey. And then in 2003, there was a number of serious domestic abuse, sadly, murders in Thames Valley and in Oxfordshire as well. And it suddenly became a priority for the police to understand what they could do better. So, as I said, I worked in the domestic violence unit, and at that point we were victim focused. There was an incident that happened where a client reached out to us, or a victim reached out to us. Now, this was somebody who we had tried to engage with on a number of occasions and had never responded to any of the telephone calls that we had made. And so we were really curious as to why, after so many attempts on our part, she was wanting to talk to us. We went out, we obviously put the support in place. And when we were reflecting with her on why, after so many times of us reaching out to her, what had changed, what had made her reach out to us and telephone us. And what she said was, there'd been an incident, and the day after the incident, a health visitor had come to visit, and she'd asked if she'd reached out to the domestic violence unit, and the victim had said, no, the police will just make it worse. And this individual professional said, no, they won't. These are victim focused. They're there for you. They're not there to report a crime or to investigate a crime. They're there for you. And
later on that day, she was speaking to another professional who also said, have you reached out to the domestic violence unit, and said they're there to support you. They're not there to investigate the crime. They're just there to make sure that you're safe. And so once we were back in the office, myself and my colleague Di were sitting having a cup of tea, and we were just reflecting on the situation, thinking, gosh, how can we support more individuals like this victim to proactively reach out? What can we do? And we realised actually that these individual professionals that had on our half advocated for the support that we could give, that actually we needed to build on that little spark, that little gem. And that's what we did. We started the Champions in 2004. The official launch was in 2004, and it's been going for 20 years since. So building on that little spark, that little grain of learning that we got from that individual's learned experience has built this network.
And Di and I were sitting later on reflecting on this, and we knew who these individuals were because we'd worked with them and we'd built a relationship with them. We said, you know, what we want is we need to build that type of relationship with more people in a more formal way. And so we were able to get support from the local crime, I don't think they were called crime reduction partnerships then, but that's who we got support from. And we got a little bit of money from health. And so we set up our first network in 2004. We did the training, and it was a very much practical based, this is what you do. We gave them links to all the other champions. We said we were there for them if they had a concern, if they were worrying. So it wasn't just training, it was about empowering them to feel they had some sense of autonomy, but actually, like a good parent, they had a safe base if they needed to come back. And so that developed over the next couple of years, and it was really successful. Now, other areas saw us doing this and thought, oh, that looks dead easy. We'll just do a bit of training and have some network sessions. And at the time, we didn't really understand why it worked. And we had used inadvertently the lived experience of that individual. We'd used the learned wisdom we had from us delivering the service. We had always had an interest in research, and so we looked at what the available research was. We went to visit the Women's Safety Unit and the Sunflower Centre, and then after a year we were able to, the local domestic abuse steering group chair did an evaluation, and the feedback was immensely positive. So we thought, we'll crack on with it. When I left that role about 3 years later, my manager said, can you tell me why it worked? And I went, I can tell you what I did, but I can't tell you why it worked. And by this stage, the other Champions networks that had been started by a number of areas around where we were in Thames Valley hadn't worked. They hadn't got the same traction, and they thought they'd done the same as us, but they clearly didn't, because they became a chain of emails. People didn't turn up to network sessions and they couldn't work out why, and a number of them folded. And it was some 10 years later when I was at the NSPCC speaking to a researcher who's not a million miles away from here today, and this researcher, Mike, said to me, have you read this book called Switch? And I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So he introduced me to this book by two Harvard professors, Chip and Dan Heath, and this is fundamentally why it worked. Now, if I can get this to so this led me on a route to understand this thing called behavioral science, or implementation science, behavioral change. And it led me to understand or get interested in another theoretical framework. And many of you will remember this from management training. It's used a lot of management training about the diffusion of innovations, which is Everett Rogers, been around since the 60s. And I think the interesting thing about Rogers's work, there's a lot of really good stuff in there about gatekeepers and people you need to engage with, but it's this idea of the gap, jumping the gap. And so for those of you who don't know who Everett Rogers is, this is a very another very short video it's easier than me explaining it, to explain what the diffusion of innovation is and how we use this, and we didn't realize we used it initially, is we found it helped us target our conversation and target our messages when we did understand it. And so we very clearly target our messaging, and that's the big thing about the work that I learned was you can't teach everybody all at the time. All at the same time is impossible. You need to have a stage process, and you need to understand that, and that's what this did. And so with the Heath brothers, we learned around emotion, we learned about pathways, we learned about directing the rider, but with this we learned around communicating and how you do that. So that was that allowed us to understand when we were trying to develop any project around how we market it, but also in the development stage as well, when this doesn't just kick in once you have a service or once you have something you're trying to get people to engage with or to do. You need to think about in the planning stage, because you need to understand your why. In the planning stage, you need to understand where you're going to target it. You need to understand who you're going to go with first. You need to understand how that all fits together. Now, for my team, I don't overwhelm them with this, because I lead all the project groups, and so I know when things are not working. And so for my community officer, I'll say to her, don't go where there's no energy at the minute. Where is the energy? And we start off with where the energy is, which is who are your innovators, who are the people who are excited about getting involved. Who are they? Let's target those first. And so that's kind of how I use it. And we use the domestic abuse is not short of emotion. It's not short of passion. And so what we try to do is give an outlet for that passion. There's a university, or a part of university, called the National Implementation Research Network in North Carolina, and they've done a lot of work in this, and they are the science bit, the implementation science bit. Now, I'm a behavioralist, I believe. I'm, as I say, I'm not a researcher, or I've got no degree in it, but my natural way of working is through kind of the behavioralist approach. But we all need a bit of structure, and we all need to understand that even within the behavioralist approach, there are implementation stages, and Nern have done a great piece of work on this, and Dean Fixon is the faculty lead, and I've never fangirled before, apart from when I met Dean Fixon, and I was all tongue-tied because I've seen a lot of videos for him. And the biggest takeaway I took from Nern, one of their videos, is training is not enough. If you want to make people change, you can't just train them, because all you do is increase their knowledge, and only between 5 and 10% will change their behaviour. And if you do nothing to support that going forward, that'll probably taper off as well. And so that was a big shocker as somebody who'd done a lot of training and had delivered a lot of training. And so this framework is based on having a useful and evidence-based approach or project, which is, and this is really important when all of my projects is it teachable, is it learnable, is it doable, is it accessible, and is it scalable? So when I start anything, that's always in my mind. And what I've added to that, which is not in there, but what I add is it affordable? Because if it's not affordable for the local authority or at a scalable then it won't get adopted, because the financial draw will be too much. And also, when we're talking about cost as well, we're not just talking about the price of it, we're talking about the cost to the organisation of the time. And so, you know, we've done a lot of work proven that about the benefit people get from sending their staff on 2 days champions training. Then there's implement stages, which I'll come into a little bit. There's teams, the people you need to drive it. There are the drivers, which is around competency, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then there's the learn, do, act. So everything is a continuous learning process. You've got to have an open mind. You've got to be able to challenge. You've got to know where you're going. You've got to have your end in sight. But actually, everything is an evolution. So this is the implementation drivers. This is actually, once you've got your little project up going in one place, how can we embed that? Because as I'm kind of trying to implement it in real life rather in a defined kind of study. So when you've got a study, which I've done in the past, you've got a number of people that you may have control over, you've got control over the training, you've got control of everything. And that's not easy, but that's doable because you have control. When you're trying to scale it, you have no control over anything. And so how do you do that? And this is a really helpful framework, is the people have got to be competent, and they've got to feel confident and competency. And confidence is one of our measures that we ask every year. How confident do you feel? How competent do you feel? And then we need to make sure that what we're asking people to do aligns with their organisational framework. And so we have a role description for our champions, and then we also have a management kind of responsibility about what they're allowing people to do. And then we need to kind of have really good leaders who need to be visible, they need to be seen, they need to be able to drive it. And as leaders, that's what reducing the risk is. We are the leaders, isn't it? There's a couple of individuals who lead the project, but as an organisation we lead. This is the implementation stages. So for every project we've done, we've tried to understand what we're doing, we've tried to understand where we're going. Then we start the installation, and we're just in the installation phase for our torchbearer sites. Each one is at a little different stage. But actually we need to know that's going to take a little while to get traction. And then you start to see actually the initial take up or the wider adoption, if you like, of the project as you're going through. Why this is helpful is if you're trying to explain to funders to say, this is what we will see. You won't get 100 people in day one. That'll be about day 10 or whatever. And so for me, it's a way to explain to funders where we are. And what they call full adoption is between 2 and 5 years. And that might be seen as business as usual, but there's always evolution. If you don't evolve, if you don't adapt, then you just get stale. You need to stay relevant, you need to stay on top of your game, and that's what we always try to do. And so we're 20 years in from the champions. It started 20 years ago. It came into the charity formally in about, I think it was 2012, 2013. And we've got 4,300 fully trained champions, and then we've got another 3,000 who are part of the network but not fully trained, and that's kind of their decision. They're out of an area, or they at this stage don't want to be fully trained, but they're part of the network that we've got. And so we survey our fully trained champions every year. It's an annual thing, and so this has been relatively consistent over the years, and we've got 3 evidence independent studies. So this year, Ali, who's on the call today, did our research for us, independently looked at it for us. But in 2019 and 2021, we did 2 independent studies. The 2019 one was the biggest one that we'd ever done, and it interviewed champions, and it looked at the systems and processes, and it reviewed all of the data. And in 2021, we also spoke to clients as well to see what their experience was when they had initially come through the service with a champion. Even if they didn't know it, they'd initially come to the service through a champion. And so kind of over the years, the confidence is very high. People have supported 4 on average. And now we've taken out any special services. So these people who are in generic services, 4 on average, but they also support colleagues. And so that's a huge amount of ripple effect from these individuals within organisations. And what they did with it, they signposted, they did safety planning, they directly supported, or they indirectly supported through a client. And so we're able not just to demonstrate we've trained this amount of people, but this is what they're doing with it. Now, I want to do a randomised control trial just to see if it's had an impact on a population level. because for those of you who do research, you need to, you'll only see it at a population level if you get over 50% of the population doing what you want. So that's the population of people you're working with. And so that's my hope and ambition going forward, is to try and get an RCT to see what we do in our torchbearer sites. Is it safer? Is it better? Is it more cohesive than where there isn't a torchbearer site? So that's my kind of long-term plan. The torchbearer started in 2023. I was thinking about how we could bring things together, how we had a service over here which was a piece of recovery work. We had our domestic abuse champions, we had our friends, and they all felt a bit disconnected. They were really good projects themselves, but they all felt disconnected. And I was invited by the Mayor of Abingdon, which is in the Vale of White Horse in South Oxfordshire, southern part of Oxfordshire. And she had worked for the NHS and had a real passion for domestic abuse and wanted to do something in her town. And so we were invited by one of our champions, that's the beauty of having champions everywhere, to come along to an event. And we went along and met the mayor then, and she said, look, I'm putting on a massive event in the town centre at the cinema, and I'm going to open it up to the community, and I want people to come along and talk about what we want to do in Abingdon. And so she asked me to be the last speaker to reflect on what they had said. And so there was obviously the mayor, and then there was a number of individuals who had lived in Abingdon, who worked in Abingdon, who had experienced domestic abuse, who what had worked for them, what hadn't worked. And there was people from the floor. There was there was a lady who was a victim of domestic abuse in the 50s and had left her abusive relationship in the 70s and had remarried, but was really passionate about what she felt might help. And so I just listened to what they were saying, and it really motivated me to think, actually, this is a great place to do something. I'm not quite sure what the something is. And so I fed back to the town and I said, it feels like we want to do something. Should we do something together? Which is fundamentally what I said. And I had no money. I had not many staff to do with, but it felt a real opportunity. We were finding the innovators. We found our first innovator. Were they even looking for it? We were open to that innovator, and we found the elephant because they were highly motivated. What we needed to help them was to kind of get that path right and kind of direct that elephant, if you like. And what the town wanted to do was to write a charter. And so we worked with the town council and a project group which had people with lived experience on about writing the town charter. And I wrote what a torchbearer site might look like for the town. And the people in the project group thought it looked great, thought, actually, let's do that. That's exactly what the people in the room said they wanted. And so we've started it a few months ago, and based on that triangle. So we are in our installation stage. We're trying to get to the right people. We've trained all of the town council in Friends. We put champions training on, and so we're getting a lot of champions within that area. And we've done posters, we put on signpost sessions so people can turn up and meet somebody physically, which is what they wanted. And we now have the ability and the funding to put on peer groups, which is what they wanted as well. And so it's in its installation phase, and we're moving through to getting it really moving. But it's been a real advantage working in an innovation site, working with the council who want to try something different. They want to be the first to do it, which was what we're able to do. So this is just the 4 strands of evidence. So we had the lived experience from those individuals in the room, which really kind of gave me that motivation. We got learned experience from us about the projects that we'd done and the research that we knew about prevalence in Abingdon and the impact in Abingdon of what the local data was saying. And so we went away and we looked at, was there any research out there around working on a town? And so we've kind of looked at a bit of that, what is out there. And Ali's continuing to look at what is out there around the research. And we have got an evaluation attached to it, which is a systems based. How can we get the system to work better? And we're in the process of developing our theory of engagement. A lot of you might have heard of a theory of change. We do need to do a theory of engagement because domestic abuse victim survivors are really difficult to engage with because they don't trust. And so we have a theory, we'll be developing a theory of engagement, what we want to change on a systems level, but also what we don't want to make worse. So our theory of unintended consequences and harm is something that Mike and I came up with a number of years ago. But that's about making sure we've thought through the things we don't want to unintentionally harm or make things worse for people. And the population, the implementation science that I've worked with is embedded in there as well. And I'm probably the only one who is aware of this, because we don't want to overwhelm the staff. And so I kind of manage the projects, and so I can see what needs to be done. This I developed, this is kind of my Ada memoir, if you like, which is all of those theories. When I worked in another project and somebody then said to me, why did it work? That we sat down and we looked at what it did work. And so this is just a nod to my kind of overarching framework, which helps me kind of make sense of it. Do I understand my problem well enough? Have I got a solution, a workable, teachable solution? Who is driving it forward? Where is the elephant? Where is that motivation? It also needs to be teachable, doable, affordable. All of that needs to be pragmatically built into there. Who are we going to have on the and the project group? Are we going to do a proof of concept? The price, not about how much we're going to charge, but how much it's going to cost organisations. Where are we in that process? What have we done around the phasing? And how are we going to publicise it using Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation? How do we make that work? And so that is what I've done. We need to measure everything we're doing. And I don't know those of you who were around in 2005 to 2010, but there was a big push on Mark Friedman's work around outcomes-based accountability, and it died a death. And I don't know why, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I continue to use this because it's really simple. And so whenever I'm making funding bids, whenever I'm measuring anything, we're always able to say, how much are we doing? So that's great. How much are we doing? How well are we doing it? And so what? That is a really simple framework that I work towards when we're doing all of this work. So I'm just going to finish off with a case study of our DA friends. So why it came about, what we did, how we used research, learned and lived experience, evaluation to make sure what we were doing was the right thing. When I came back in 2022, I was looking at the data and listening to the team, and they were saying, gosh, I'm working with a lot of older clients. And I looked at the data and realised we had an uptick from about 2% for the last 10 years to suddenly we had 10% of our clients were over 65. And so I started to do some research looking at what had we done in the past to engage with older people, or what had been done to engage on a community level, to realise that our work in communities that we tried 2 or 3 years before hadn't worked. Which was interesting, and there had just been a joint strategic needs assessment published, which said violence in rural communities had gone up, violence for older people in rural communities had come up. There was some research around older individuals, their dependency, and a lot of there was carers. The people who were now perpetrating abuse were family members, grandchildren, children, as well as intimate partners. There was, in rural areas, there was a lack of formal support. It was a bit of a collective community, certainly in the farming communities. And there was a bit of research from the Rural Crimes Network, which says domestic abuse victims stay 25% longer in rural areas. And so our problem statement was, how do we support? We've got all the domestic abuse victims who are isolated, hidden. There's little formal support, and family and friends and community lack confidence and knowledge and the assets. There wasn't enough stuff to go in rural communities, because rural communities like stuff. They may have a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group, but actually they go to their church a lot. They all go to the notice board.
So we understood what the problem was. We had our problem statement, but actually, how were we going to understand how to intervene effectively and what would help? Our bright spark came from our own service delivery, our IDVAs. They had been working with a lady called Sandra. She's been anonymised to protect her identity. Sandra had been living with a close family member for about 4 years, and her neighbour had become concerned because the carers that were once going in were now not going in, and she was seeing less and less of Sandra. And she saw something one day which made her really worried and reach out to the police for advice. At this point, the police called us and we went along with them to have a conversation with Sandra. We supported Sandra as her close family member left the property and was asked to stay away, which she did for a number of years. However, before we left supporting Sandra, we went and spoke to the neighbours and gave them our cards and said, you know, should anything happen, please come back and let us know, because we're always there to support Sandra. Even though the case is closed now, we're always there to support her. And duly, in about 2 years after we closed the case, there was indeed a telephone call from the neighbour saying that actually this close family member had indeed returned to the property, and she hadn't seen Sandra for a few days and she was really worried about her. And so we went out with the police, and actually that family member had indeed returned. And what we had done, we had taken a situation where Sandra had lived with this family member who'd been controlling her every move for 4 years down to about 4 months. And so we wanted to know, how could we take what we'd learned from that situation where we'd empowered the neighbours, we'd empowered her, and we'd given the information and to know who she could call. How could we take that and make it scalable?
And so I pulled together a rural advisory group. I commissioned a piece of research from Birmingham University to look at the intersectionality between rurality, domestic abuse, and older people. The rural advisory group were fundamental to this whole. People with lived experience who lived in villages. Some had domestic abuse, some did not. I told them the problem. I anonymised obviously everything, and said we tried this before, and they within 5 minutes went, oh yeah, no, we can see what you've done there. No, you don't need to tell us we have a problem and say come to an awareness session is telling us you have a problem. What we want in rural communities is we like to help. We like to know what our job is and how we can help. And so the DA Friends was born of that rural advisory group, and we came up with a tagline which is listen without judgment, link to support, and lend a hand to raise awareness. We developed the engagement, change and unintended consequences theories, and we managed to get funding for a fantastically passionate leader, and we did a proof of concept with outcomes-based accountability as part of it. And what we wanted to do was get this implementable, something we could implement, which was teachable, doable, replicable, and not that expensive, because if it was ridiculously expensive, you're never going to get buy-in from it. And on the left-hand side there, you'll see nudges, which I won't go into a lot, but the Behavioural Insights team and John Cotter, I like his work as well on making change happen, helped us with this as well. We used some of their frameworks as well. So how much did we do? So because of the numbers we'd had coming through 2 years previous, which were like 50 for the whole year, we said we would probably see about 80 people. We'd probably deliver about 30 sessions if we were lucky, and we might engage with 50 or 60 kind of organizations. And actually, as soon as we got the right person with the right message, it just went mad and has continued to go mad. So we engaged with 820 individuals through going to sessions. Going to them was the big thing, going to them. This included the Mothers Union, it included Women's Institutes. From that, 263 people formally signed up to be friends. So it wasn't that these other ones didn't get the training or the assets. It was just these 263 people said, no, I'd like a newsletter. I'd like to know about any events and I'd like to help out. And so we delivered 320 sessions to 170 different organisations. Multiple organisations had multiple sessions. And so that's kind of how much we did for Use OBA. How well and so what? We did a survey, and which is where you get your how well and so what. And I've bottled this down to the ones I think you'd be interested in. 95% of them learned something new around domestic abuse. And the so what, 83% of them knew after the session or believed they knew someone who was experiencing or at risk of domestic abuse but 84% of them, so more people, had had a conversation with somebody they had concerns about. And so it was a profound kind of issue, and since then, it's one of the measures was how many people disclosed to friends, and last year we had 40 disclosures that were managed via the Friends Network initially, which is immense, which is huge. I'm not going to play this one because I haven't got time. So I want to give you some time. So we've done that for each of the elements of the torchbearer. So the next thing is we're working with Ali to look at developing a systems research, to develop the theories of change, to drive forward in military, Abingdon and a district council area. We continue to evolve with the support of people who've got a learned lived experience research and the evaluation, and we're continuing that co-production. We need to understand the individual needs, because what we want to do is not everything will work for everybody in everybody's circumstances. What we're trying to do is sort out what works for who in what circumstances, what are the things that give you traction, what are the generic barriers to it. And we've just got this new project, which is a 3-year project in schools, looking at working with 28 nursery, primary and secondary schools. And I just want to finish off with the beginning of this, because I know we'll get to the end. With the beginning of this, we continue to feed our elephant. We continue to get people who are highly motivated, and we put a conference on in 2024. And it was our celebratory conference. It was 20 years since we started, and so we invited our champions. Not all of them came, but 120 came, and we invite them to come along and look at what we've been doing, to meet together. But we paid for a lovely venue, we paid for nice food, we've made them feel valued and cared for and wanted, because they do this without being paid. And we started off the conference with this. I'm just going to show you the beginning of this to kind of let you see how we use that motivation. We have a Voices project, which gives us videos and conversations with our clients so that we can use them. And this is a poem, which I won't play it all because we haven't got time, but I'll just show the beginning to give you an idea of how we were trying to get people emotionally connected and to feel proud and part of the herd, part of a greater, bigger thing than themselves. So I won't play it now, but I will send out the link so you can see it. So the last slide is just to say the torchbearer fundamentally is trying to take all of the passion that we all have for working in this space, for working with the most vulnerable in society, for working with a huge amount of people who are impacted by domestic abuse, to take that passion and kind of direct it down a route, and so that we can harness it to make lives better for every survivor, every child, every family and every future. So that's me finished.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dawn, for this presentation today. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of stuff you've done generally, but in particular relating to the issue of what these sessions are about, the sort of multitude of theories that over time that you've sort of incorporated and reflected on and turned into practice and turned into success. And then also the different ways in which you've used research evaluation and lived experience along the way. To also develop that very locally relevant data that's allowed you to make decisions and understand and develop insight. It's just incredible. There's so much to unpack, really. And I'm just really impressed. It's a really good example of what's called these days relational practice, right? How you've sort of empowered a network and an energy amongst and galvanized a huge community, really, who can go far beyond what any single organization could hope to achieve by just using their own workforce. So much to sort of celebrate and think about. There are some questions in the chat, so I don't know if people are happy to come on camera or not. Don't worry if you're not, but I'll give you a second to make your mind up. So I've got a question from Nikki. I don't know, Nikki, if you're still around, but Nikki's asked. There's so many people online, I can't see faces pop up and appear, but Nikki's asked, you've mentioned using surveys a few times. Any tips on how to encourage a good response rate?
So our response rate is always between 7 and 9%. And it's part of the compact. We say when we do training, you will get a survey every year, and we need to know. And it gives people the opportunity to feed in. So I don't think our survey response is particularly brilliant, but it's not terrible. So, and because we do it every year and we get a very similar percentage, we are getting more people, obviously, each year feeding back. But we mention it in our training at any network sessions we have. So we have 2 network sessions every year, and we have a number of online webinars and forums, and each of those we mention it. And we do a monthly newsletter, and when you're trying to get people to surveys and things like that, you've got to be really clear about the why. Again, it's back to start with the why. And so we really push on the why and what it gives us and how we're able to learn from it and influence it, and how it helps us decide what webinars we're going to put on the following year, because it tells us what people want to see and hear. So understand your why, Nikki. That's what I would say.
And we've got I don't know, Tricia, you're still online, but I think you are. You've asked, do you have a link to the research? Which research was it, Tricia? If you don't want to come online and show your face, you can put it in the chat, but you're welcome to if you're brave enough.
So we have a research page on our website, and there's a link. There's a research page at the end of this, so you've got links to a number of the videos, and a link to our the research. Some of it is for our internal consumption. So we published the 2019, and I think we published the 21, and the research we've done on courts. So there's a number, and the LGBTQ plus community. So there's a number of research documents on our website on the About Us section.
Well, thank you, Dawn. It was mainly the research around with Birmingham University, the rural and older people.
Oh yeah,
research. Yeah.
I'll put that. Actually, I'll get that uploaded onto the website. If not, I'll send it to Mike. I think Mike's got it, haven't you?
I probably do, but it's in my immense library of reports.
It was fascinating research, which at the end of the day said there is no research around older community. That's fundamentally what it said. Because it was a university that did it, their level of their threshold for including research into the overall one, I'll share it, was very high, because they were not only looking at what research had been done, but the quality of the research. So they hadn't even included the rural network crime piece of research. But yeah, I'm happy to send that to Mike, and he can send it out to me to do.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have any reflections, comments? Anyone working on something similar? And any further questions? I'm just going to read out, maybe as a sort of parting a comment from Jeff Pearson, who I think earlier on in the chat had said he has a role in engaging men in white ribbon bystander intervention training. And he said, through listening to this presentation, he's had a light bulb moment that he thinks it would be good for him to work with them by outlining the issue and asking them for the solution, but in a neutral environment, he's written. And he said he'll be working some ideas up. So that's his light bulb moment. Any reflections on that, Dawn? I think Jeff's dialed off for now, but I can always pass them on if you've got any reflections on that.
I think when you told me about that book, that was a massive light bulb moment for me, I have to say, and led down the last 10 years of my life, Mike, so thanks for that. But I think it's those light bulb moments are really important, and I think helping people, because as professionals we've also got a lived experience ourselves, but actually it was an informal rural advisory group. I invited some people to come for a coffee and some cake, so it was very, very relaxed. And I started off by saying, I'm not here to get money from you, because when you're a charity and you want to speak with people, the first thing you always think is I want to get money from you. I just need your thoughts and your input. And they came up with the solution. It was it didn't take very long, because they understood their own context, they understood village life, they understood living in a rural setting, and they understood by saying, I'm going to talk about domestic abuse as awareness session, nobody would turn up. So and the difference between when we did it 2 years before and when we started the Friends, there was no comparison. It was it outstripped everything. And so it doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean you get a number of false starts, but actually it did really help.
Fantastic. I'll pass those comments on to Jeff.
Oh, hey, Catherine, we've got a relationship, as I said, we build long-term relationships with a sister charity in South Shields, which is actually where I did my nurses training, which is bizarre. And Catherine is the chief exec, and they have taken on champions, and so they're delivering champions, because we've obviously got 20 years of this. And so she was like, why do we need to redo it? And so what we're really passionate about is people who are embedded in the community understand their community. And so that's the beauty of small charities, you understand it. And so that's what's happening in South Shields as well. And Catherine's going through our installation phase at the moment, trying to find out where they fit and where the training is. So it's wonderful to see Catherine on today. Hi, Catherine.
Oh, Catherine, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, and absolutely no problem if you'd rather not share on this occasion. But do you have any sort of anything to add to what Dawn said in terms of your experiences of setting off on the same sort of journey?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been really lucky, because that Dawn and the team have come up and trained us, and they've been a great support and still continue to be a great support for us while we're doing it. We're taking a slightly different route with ours, and we're focusing more on the corporate sector with our training, and that's obviously taken, and that's part of a strategy for our charity to engage with the business community. And it's interesting, because I think the whole thing about domestic abuse, and certainly having businesses to acknowledge it and recognise it and acknowledge that they could have employees who are victims of abuse, is quite new to them, or certainly new to them having to really think about it and do something about it. So there's lots of interest, but it's quite it's sort of baby steps with people. So we've got people dipping in. We've done quite a bit of sort of free try before you buy type of training sessions at the minute, but it's starting to build some momentum around that. So yeah, we're doing it from a slightly different angle, but everybody knows they need it. It's just it's a slow process for that sector at the minute to get the buy-in.
Yeah, the installation phase is very slow. Yeah,
very slow. Yeah, and I think particularly with them, but we're invested in it because we know that it's what's needed. And we know, you know, we've talked to Dawn and seen some of these videos from Dawn and the team, and it's that ripple effect that we need, and that, you know, that's needed in society as a whole. So yeah, it's I'm very impatient and I want these people to come through quickly, but I'm learning that no, it's a process. And we're very excited by it, and we're very confident that the take up certainly in the next year is going to start to really come through.
Yeah, I think you just need to find your innovators, and I think that's, you know, once you find your innovators and you get some traction and they can speak to other people, then you will see well, it'll just take, I think it'll take off. But yeah, the corporate sector for us, we have got an offer which is based on our friends offer and our champions offer as well. So it was really exciting to find an organisation like Catherine's, which was exactly the same as ours. So Catherine does long-term support as well. Catherine is about the individual, and you know, we're very lucky that our commissioner allows us to, it's not in our contract to say you only have to work for this amount of time. And so we were very fortunate, I think, when we met. It was like, oh my goodness, we're the same organisation, just split by 700 miles, whatever it is, which was which is unusual to find.
Fantastic, and thanks for those reflections, Catherine. Anyone else for any sort of parting comments, lastminute.com questions?
So Tricia said she would like to connect with us around the GA Champions as part of the, is that the Southeast, I don't know what SETDAB is, but yeah, Mike's got my email. Please please do reach out. We can both for England on, well, I can both for England on this, so I'm very happy. If you want to reach out and have a conversation, please do.
Fantastic, lovely. Okay, well, thanks everyone for dialing in, and thanks especially to you, Dawn, for preparing this presentation, especially for this evaluation in practice series. And all the best with the work in the future, Dawn, and maybe we'll welcome you back in another year's time to see how things have been getting on.
Yeah, well, I'll bring Ali next time, because Ali will have no doubt be pushing me out the way, because she'll have all the research behind it, because she's it's a great asset to have somebody who can independently look at what you're doing in a way, because you're emotionally wedded to it, so you're always looking for the positives, but it's nice to have somebody do it independently for us, which is a great asset.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everyone, and see you in the new year.